Ideas in STEM Ed is a production of the Idea Engineering Student Center at UC San Diego, which works to promote community, success, and inclusion at all levels. My name is Darren Lipomi, Professor of Nanoengineering and Chemical Engineering and Faculty Director of the Idea Center. The purpose of this podcast is to provide a forum for the discussion of innovative and inclusive approaches to teaching and mentoring, and to support the personal and academic flourishing and success of students in science and engineering. To learn more about the Idea Center, visit jacobschool.ucsd.edu/idea. I'm happy to introduce Dr. Brandon Marin to molecular podcasting. Brandon is an R&D engineer at Intel in Arizona. In full disclosure, Brandon was a PhD student of mine in chemical engineering at UC San Diego. He's also a close friend. Brandon is an example of someone with whom I share a convergent trajectory. That is, we were born 3 months apart in 1983, and our kids were born 3 weeks apart in 2019. We're both uber nerds with a passion for sci-fi, fantasy, and The Simpsons. However, Brandon's life took a rather significant meander into the dark world of addiction and the criminal justice system. As you will hear him when he tells his story, I'm sure you'll agree with me that Brandon has been through the depths of despair that would probably have killed a lesser human. However, Brandon's story is an extraordinary inspiration. He eventually recovered and not only earned his PhD, but is now the inventor on a mountain of patents at his current employer. So I would like to start with the question that I ask all my guests. Actually, you're the first one. What was your favorite library book growing up, and why was it the Star Trek The Next Generation technical manual?
I think... So I love that. So the technical manual, actually, you brought up a good point. I actually pulled it off of the racks at the library. I used to go to the Oak Ridge library in Chino Hills when I was in elementary school, and I pulled it off, and I immediately asked my mom if she could get it for me for Christmas, and she did. And I think what I loved about that manual so much is I was so hooked on that show, episode by episode, and just the whole franchise in general. Like, it gave me the depth of knowledge that I needed to satisfy my curiosity with the show. Like, I wasn't satisfied with just knowing, like, you know, that the NCC 1701D could go to warp 9.9997. Like, I needed to know all the specifications in it. And that's kind of probably why I became an engineer. Like, and what was cool about the manual, like, it tell you things that weren't on the show too, like extra tidbits, like that like the Enterprise like had actually like a dolphin wing, like that had dolphins that they trained, and it actually took up like a significant portion of like the ship, and they even had a whale, I think.
Did they have a Lewis dot structure of dilithium in there? We actually had the book too. I remember it because my mom is a librarian, and we had the copy that was torn along the backbone, and it had the packing tape that was keeping all the pages together. Even though I think 100% of the damage was probably caused by me. So tell me a little bit more about where you grew up.
Yeah. Sure. I grew up in Los Angeles, California. My family is second generation. My grandparents were born in Mexico, and my grandfather immigrated to the U.S. During World War II. He fought for in Europe, and then actually I pulled it up off of Ancestry.com. He got his citizenship in Alabama at like an army base. They basically... Back then, like, all you needed to do to be a citizen is just sign over your life to the military, and they gave you the citizenship document right there on the spot. I grew up in LA, and I think my family's always like lived in that area too. I went to high school in Belmont and a couple other high schools in the LA area, but I finally graduated from West Covina. In South Hills High School in West Covina, and my family moved there when I was in sophomore year of high school. And that's actually, my mom wanted me to go to better school. The LA Unified School District has metal detectors like in its school, so she didn't really think it was the best. Not to say that South Hills was much better, I think, like from the quality of the education, but I think, it was just definitely a better neighborhood.
Yeah. What kind of friends did you have in high school, and what sort of crowd did you hang out with?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I was a skateboarder in high school, like one of those skater kids. I kind of lived a double life because I was a nerd, like behind closed doors. Like I was in all the AP classes, and I was like in the calculus club and the chemistry club. But then I was also sponsored for skateboarding at the time by Utility Board Shop. And I think I was the only person that was sponsored at our high school. So back then, if you were good at skateboarding, you were like popular. But then also too, like I was kind of like the antithesis of it too, because I was also in all the smart kid classes, like and I actually did really well at my high school. I led the calculus club for a while because I was the only person my year to get like a 5 on the calculus AP exam, and
You've bested me, sir.
yeah,
I
didn't do
obtained
well
a
on
mere 4.
Yeah, I got a 4 on chemistry though. I don't know how you did exam, but that was
My only 5 was English. I don't know what that tells you about me.
that makes sense
So,
because you're a great writer
oh well,
and
well,
orator
you
too.
flatter
So.
me. You flatter me. So when you applied to college, you stayed in the LA area. Tell me about your decision. Why did you go where you went?
Yeah, I really wanted to go to Caltech, but Caltech has a very, very rigorous vetting program for their undergrads. For those out there who know that, it's much easier to get into Caltech for grad than undergrad. And I got rejected, and I remember it just sunk me because I wanted, because just being a sci-fi nerd, like, everybody talks about like Caltech, like even like in sci-fi culture, and it's kind of like the center of scientific progress. And I ended up getting rejected. My second choice was USC, and I remember the week in between, like my first letter was from Caltech, and the second one was from USC. I was just so depressed because I'm like, I'm just going to get a slew of rejects, and the next one I got was from USC, and they accepted me. And I didn't even bother looking at my next choices. Most of them were local schools. My family, we couldn't afford out-of-state tuition, so I had to go. I was really looking at something in-state. And USC at that time, they had a lot of money for like financial aid for minority students and and people that were local. So that was actually what I ended up choosing as my university. But it was kind of a double-edged sword because as I'll get into it later, like that staying in the LA area probably wasn't the best thing for me socially, but yeah, I ended up making that choice because of financial decisions. But yeah.
And how did you choose your major? Chemical engineering, the reason I ask is that it's not something that high school students really know that much about. They kind of think it's like applied chemistry, but we don't go into that choice with a lot of information.
I know, yeah. For me, actually, I really wanted to do civil engineering because when I was a kid, at first I wanted to be an architect. And I used to draw buildings and structures, and I actually learned a little bit of statics when I was in high school because I really liked buildings and architecture so much. But it was kind of a doofus move. I bubbled in my acceptance application where you have to actually, back then you used to bubble in manually like your major code, and for some reason I put I think it was CENG instead of CHE at USC, and that was I thought was or civil engineering, but it was actually chemical engineering.
Oops.
Is a CHE, and they ended up auto enrolling me in all the courses, and I showed up at USC and started taking the courses. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not even supposed to be in this. And I went to the department advisor. At the time, it was Karen Wu. I don't think she's there anymore at USC, but the department chair at the time, Catherine Xing, who is still there. She's a thermo professor still. I was there complaining, I need to be in chemical or civil engineering. I'm not supposed to be here. I came in and she told me that nobody stays in chemical engineering, that everyone flunks out of it. I took that as like a personal challenge. Like, what, like at that point, I was like, well, I could do anything I put my mind to. I'll take these courses and we'll see how it goes, and I ended up loving it. I didn't realize because I loved chemistry in undergrad and I love math. And chemical engineering is like the perfect mix of those two. And I guess it was just serendipity because I guided me into the major that I still to this day really, really love. And I think you can attest to that. Like, I've always liked teaching it. I've always liked studying it. And I think I'm kind of right where I need to be.
Yeah, I can sympathize. I mean, being a trained chemist, but now being a professor of chemical engineering, I've uh, I've I've enjoyed the extent to which I've been adopted into your intellectual family. So you came to USC thinking that you were a civil engineer, and then you were surprised with the chemical engineering courses. But what surprised you socially? Like when you showed up at your dorm room, who was there and what was going on?
Yeah, so I remember I showed up in my dorm and I was like, so I kind of didn't mention this before, but when I was in high school, like I used to experiment with drugs, like, and at the time everybody that I knew kind of did, especially being a skateboarder and stuff and, in the party scene, that's kind of what you did. And like I experimented with like meth and acid and some other things like when I was in high school. And then I was like, no, okay, now that I got in a good school, like now I really got to put like my tires on the tracks. Like now I got to really quit doing this little weekend like partying thing. Because now I'm going to go to college and the college scene is where you find out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. You don't waste your time on drugs and alcohol and things in college. At least that's what I thought. And I remember my first day I moved into my dorm in Hardy Tower, right there off of Figueroa. No pun intended, Hardy with a D. And I got my bags and I moved into my dorm room, 505. And I opened the door and my roommate was there. He was an aerospace engineer. And I said, hi, my name's Brandon. He said, hi, my name's Jason. And he's like, so you want to get wasted? And I was like, yeah, let's get wasted. And it was like 3 PM. And that's when it just hit, like, it was like a really, really heavy party scene in the dorms when I was a freshman, and it accelerated really, really fast from that point on. I think should I just get into like?
So what happened with your schoolwork at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it went down. I managed to keep it together for a couple semesters, and but by the second semester, I was drinking so much, and at this point, I started like messing around with heroin, which was a hell of a drug. Really, really tightly gripped me, and my grades just went down the tube at that point because at that point I was no longer going to class.
This is freshman year, second semester, or
This was actually second semester of freshman year. Yeah.
mm,
So I tried to hang on for a couple more semesters, but at that point it was like I was enrolling for classes and not showing up for them, like wasting tuition money and then just selling, doing weird things like making drugs at home with the knowledge that I learned like in school. Like it got really, really bad really, really fast. And at that point too, I also started getting caught up by the law, like started getting possession charges. And I think at that point, like school was like an alibi more than it was like a purpose, like for my family. Like I would tell them that I was at school, but really I was just doing my own thing, trying to get drugs. And for me, that long story short, after about a year and a half of being in school, like I had no money. I was getting evicted from my apartment at the time because at this point the dorms, the USC student housing association just like kicked me out because I was just a nightmare in there, like just destroying things. And
so what were some of the charges, like other than just being a personal disaster?
Yeah, so that's actually a funny story because the Office of Judicial Affairs one day left a letter on my apartment door with all the charges they were charging with me, and one of them was actually inciting mayhem, which was like it seems like a Batman like a Batman charge, like because and inciting disorderly conduct because we used to have these like crazy parties in my dorm and do things like throw the water fountains out the window and like throw 40 bottles out the window. And then the Department of Public Safety just knew our dorm room as just the trouble dorm room. But I got this letter with like mayhem. It was inciting disorderly conduct, like possession of drugs, destruction of university property. It just went on and on and on. And then at that point, this university was like, okay, we're not going to interact with you anymore. We're going to suspend you until further notice. And you're not allowed on campus. Like, you need to really get your life together. And at that point, I was so numb. Like, the drugs had just kind of pretty much just numbed my mind to any consequence. I just didn't even care.
So this is like every day you're getting high every day.
Yeah, at this point, this was 2003. I was getting high every single day at this point. And keep in mind that number, 2003. Like, every day was basically, as soon as I woke up, it was, what do I need to do today to get high? And at 21 years old, 20 years old, that is like a really, really horrible place to be. Because at that point, I felt like an 80-year-old man. And I was still going to campus, even though I wasn't allowed there, because I could use the fact that people knew me to get money and resources to get drugs. And one time I got caught on campus. I actually was just sleeping in the library because at this point I didn't have anywhere to stay. And they pulled me out of the library, the DPS officers, and they're like, you need to come with us. And at this point I had warrants out for my arrest. So I was like, they're going to call the cops. And the cops are going to pull my record and they're going to take me in. And I went out and they pulled me into McCarthy Quad. It's right outside of the library. And everybody, McCarthy Quad is kind of a intersection in campus. There's tons of people like walking back and forth in that area. And I remember being in handcuffs there and seeing all these people that I knew, these people that I like took student orientation with and people that I had classes, my GEs with, and they all just saw me there just, skinny as a rail, like handcuffs on my hands, and it was just so pitiful and demoralizing. And I just remember thinking to myself, every single cell in my body, I wanted to get sober and I wanted to stop living that way. And I just had made a decision at that point. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to stay sober. And what happened was the cops came, they took me, I went to jail and I got out and I went right back to that life.
Can I interrupt for just a second? So I read this book a couple of years ago by Johann Hari called Chasing the Scream, and he talks about two different mechanisms of addiction, like the chemical hook on one hand and then the despair on the desperation on the other hand. And he gives the example of people in the UK medical system who get like medical grade heroin as an analgesic if you break your femur or something, and how a very small fraction of those people actually end up addicted, minuscule fraction. And I'm wondering if you have, in any insight, like what are the pre-factors for those mechanisms? Like, is that a thing, or is it 100% chemical hook for you, or was there desperation underneath?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's a certain type of person. I don't think it's well understood either by academia or just the population who has this disease as a whole. But the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is what the program that I use to get sober, described it very, very broadly as like there's a spiritual component and there's also like a chemical component, like how you talk about. For me, kind of as a scientist, And as a researcher, to me, I really think there is a certain biochemistry in an addict's brain that is unique to that specific type of brain. And I don't think that the majority of the population has that. And I think for those specific people, maybe those pathways in your brain have to do with the pleasure reward system of the brain or motivation or something, but it affects, I think, that small percentage differently than the rest of the population. I think that was what accounts for the majority of people. Just they take it and they just use it as its function, and they go about their merry way. Whereas there's that small percentage where as soon as it hits, there's something else that lights up in the brain, where it's like, no, I can use this for this, or I need this for this, and yeah, it's like, I think it's something as simple as people who like gravitate towards art versus mathematics. It's just a certain predisposition in the brain, and yeah. But then there's also that spiritual component, like you mentioned, that that depression, and I think for that is something that also needs to change in the brain in order for someone to recover with that type of personality, because there are a lot of personality dysfunctions that come along with the addiction: the stealing, the lying, the aggression, the manipulation. All of that is something that the disease uses, and then eventually the addict has to unlearn in order to reintegrate back into society. And I think that's an interesting part, because that part seems like it's temporary, but the chemical part is permanent. Like I don't have to experiment with this, because I know that if I go out tomorrow and I do heroin again, it's been like 13 years since I've been sober. But if I go out tomorrow, I know that same part of my brain that got lit up by it so many years ago will go right back to normal. And I haven't experimented with it myself, but I've heard enough people through self-help 12-step program meetings to know that was what will happen. So the logic part of my brain understands that enough to be like, okay, you have it pretty good now. You probably shouldn't mess around with that. So
Sure.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you brought that up. That's how I see it.
Well, thank you for indulging me on that really important aspect. I want to let you freeform a little bit to fill in the next 4 years, and I'll kind of stop you along the way if I'm curious for any clarification. But so what happened in 2003? You got kicked out of the dorm, suspended from USC. Why didn't they just terminate your enrollment? Why was it just a suspension? Because this is relevant later.
Right. So yeah, so I think, so for me, it's actually interesting that you bring that up. It brings up like a lot of emotions, because kind of looking at how my life is now and how I felt back then brings up a lot of memories of how it felt to be in that position. But they didn't expel me because they wanted to give me a second chance. And USC has a problem with addiction. There's no stranger to addiction. I mean, even 15, 20 years ago, that's apparent even to this day. I mean, USC is very culturally in the center of Los Angeles. There's a lot of scandal around the school because of things that like professors have done. So they were very familiar with my predicament. So they didn't outright expel me. They basically said, we'll give you, we're going to suspend you and see how you do. We know you have some problems going on with the law, so maybe the law will help you sort that out. And it was really the judicial system, the Los Angeles Superior Court judicial system, that got me on track. I had a judge, going back to that point where I was at the library and I really wanted to stay sober in 2003. Like I mentioned, I really wanted to stay sober, but I went off and I went running for many more years. And from 2003 to 2007, it was basically, I was in and out of jail and homeless for the majority of it. And all the cases that I had built up were being managed by this judge named Michael Tynan, who I still keep in contact with today. I email him periodically. He's the judge who sentenced Richard Ramirez to death, a Night Stalker, in Los Angeles. So he's a pretty famous judge, like Judge Ito. And he decided to stop doing high-profile cases like that, criminal court, and started doing drug court. And he basically, he was hard on me. I used to say that I would go to AA meetings. I used to forge my card thinking that this was like some revolutionary thing. I figured out how to beat the system. And he would pull me to court and then look at the meetings that I was making up and then pull out an AA directory and be like, you're not going to these meetings. These meetings don't even exist. And he would say, bailiff, remand this man for 60 days. And he'd throw me in jail for 60 days. So I learned very quickly not to lie to him. And
it's by the way, it's gonna come as a complete surprise, I think, to most people, the extent to which a judge is intervening and has a personal reason to see his, the people in his charge reformed, his or her charge reformed.
right. And Judge Tynan is very much like that. If you go and Google his name, you'll find lots of articles about people like me and how a lot of the Los Angeles community knows him for caring like that. And he knew I went to USC, and he went to USC too, I believe, as an undergrad. And he was like, I know you have a lot of potential, and I know you could turn your life around. So, and in 2007, he's like, I'm going to give you one last chance. If I see you again, you're going to go to prison. And that's it. Like, no more chances. And once you go to prison, your life will be very different after that, and, right now you have some felonies, but you're not on parole. And, I don't want to kill your life like that. And I went out and to this rehab he sent me to, and I jumped out of the window.
Can I ask you for a slightly more fine-grained version of what happened in the courtroom? Your mom was there too.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know what you're talking about too, because it's actually a separate judge that story happened with. So Judge Tynan told me he would send me to prison, and then what ended up happening was I went to the rehab and I escaped, and then I was like, he's going to send me to prison when I see him again. So I went back. Eventually I got caught up and went back to court. At this point, I was so defeated. It was 2007. I really, really didn't have anything going for me, and I was bankrupt emotionally and spiritually, and physically. And then I called my mom and I was like, okay, Judge Tynan's going to send me to prison. So can you please take me to court and just let me just turn myself in? I need somebody to do something with my life, even if it means, the CDC, the Department of Corrections in California. Like, if it has to be the prison system that does it, let's do it.
So previously it was don't mean to say only, it was county jail, right? And how long were you, how many different stints and how much time did that add up to between 03 and 07?
Between 03 and 07, I probably racked up about a year and a half in county. Just in and out, 1 month here, 3 months here, 5 months here, go to Wayside, go to, Supermax for some reason, like bouncing around like the county jails. And
there's a Supermax county jail.
Yeah, well, there's a jail called Supermax in Wayside, which is the jail that's on the way to Magic Mountain in LA, and that's the main county jail for Los Angeles County. And there's an area called Supermax, which is like the area that they send people who are eventually going to go to prison. And I would get transferred there like randomly. Like, I don't understand how the prison system, the county system works with how they move people around. But I would be there quite often, and they would be people there that had life sentences and murderers, rapists,
How many people in jail did you encounter who were familiar with the Star Trek: The Next Generation technical manual? Like, how odd was it to have somebody like you there?
Yeah, it was pretty sparingly. Actually, anytime that it was actually kind of funny because I would sometimes bring it up in conversations like, oh, I'm actually like I was going to USC for chemical engineering. I'm actually pretty smart, and actually I'm not supposed to be here at all. This is just a temporary thing while I figure out my life.
Yeah, like your frequent flyer sitting in coach.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I'm supposed to be on the other side of the curtain. I'm supposed to make the left when I go in the plane, not the right. And yeah, I was very sparingly, but I guess these were starting to become my people, and if
Sure, and you probably learned a lot from them too.
yeah, yeah, and it's like it's just such a weird walk of life to kind of encounter those types of people. And I still remember a lot of the stories I heard from those people. And my life was definitely heading for something that was people in there were like 50, 60, 40. At this time, again, I'm still in my 20s, so they would call me a baby and be like, like you still got the rest of your life, like I was in and out of the system when I was your age and I started then, now look at me, fully tatted up and living the good life in prison, and a lot of times those people they're in and out so much that they don't know how to function even outside because they spent more time in there than they've spent out, and that's that's a sad place to be, but that's the way our prison systems even are in California. I mean, there's more people in prison in California than the majority of countries on this planet.
Yeah, absurd.
One state, which is a separate conversation entirely. But
and also the system enforces with whom you can associate, right? Because you were telling me that as a Mexican American citizen, you had to affiliate with a certain cohort.
right, and there's four cohorts in there. There's the Woods, which are the white people, the blacks, the Paisas, which are all the Mexicans that are not born in the U.S., and then there's the Southsiders, which are like the cholos, gangsters. They call it four cars, and because I was actually born in the U.S., and not like in a U.S. citizen, but not in a gang, I would have to associate with the Southsiders, who oftentimes like ran their, and it wasn't like it was just like this club like Ralph's, like where you occasionally used it. They would actually require you to do things like work out. If there would be a mass fight, you would have to jump in. And if you were not seen on the right side or involved in this fight, then you would get beat up by your own people later. And yeah, it's called the politics of prison or jail, and it was very annoying because there's a lot of rules that I didn't know about when I got in there. I would share my food with people of other races, and that's like a big no-no. And I would get my ass kicked for like 26 seconds is kind of like the penalty for sharing food with.
How badly did you get injured for this kind of infraction?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How badly did you get injured?
Oh, not too bad. No broken bones or anything, but bloody nose and lots of welts and bruises on my face because it would be usually three people on one, and they would pick the three at random, and they'd usually pick the three biggest people, and they'd count for 26 seconds, and they'd just just beat you while you were down until it was up, and that was it. Yeah, and I got a lot of infractions like that for not knowing certain things, like making my bed the right way or getting caught not working out. Like that was another thing. You had to work out every day, and when you're coming off of drugs, it's not something you want to do. So they would keep track. It was like a little. He was like a little like army sergeant, the guy who would keep track of whether you worked out, and he would report you, and then you get your ass kicked for not working out. So it was quite a different system than what I'm living today. But yeah, there's a lot of politics in jail. And yeah, you pretty much have to stick with your race and that specific car cohort that you're associated with. And if you don't, then there's severe consequences. So getting your ass kicked is not the only thing too. Like, people get stabbed in there for other types of infractions. And yeah, it's kind of a dark place. Yeah.
One more question before moving back to the courtroom. In this period between '03 and '07, when you were going in and out of jail, what were some of the infractions and convictions that you had? What were those for?
Yeah, so I have GTA on my record, Grand Theft Auto, because I stole a car at the Hat. It's a really nice pastrami joint in Alhambra. Um,
Have you been back since?
I have actually. I've been there with my wife, and I go there. Actually, I went there quite regularly when I was working in at Baxter after I finished undergrad. But I was there waiting for this drug guy to show up, and then there was a BMW that pulled up, and it was a convertible, and the guy left, went and got pastrami, and I took off with his car. It didn't make. This wasn't like there was no end game in that decision. It was just completely impulsive, and I took off. And actually, the way I got caught, interestingly, was I parked in a sheriff's parking lot, and the low jack was on, and I didn't know I was parking in a sheriff's parking lot. I just turned a random corner, and I was like, I'll just park here and leave the car. And then I looked, and there were cop cars around me, and then this sheriff came out, and he was like, hey, you're not supposed to park here. And his partner was turning on the car, and every cop car has a low jack system detector on their dash, and it beeps like crazy when there's a stolen car by them. The guy turned on his car and immediately started going beep, 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 beep. And he's like, wait, you wait right there. And I got caught up, and then the sheriff was like, you have to be one of the dumbest people I've ever met, and hopefully the judge just lets you off for, doing this dumb decision, because you brought the car right back to us that we were looking for. And so that's one. I have numerous.
You realize I'm only laughing because you're laughing, right?
Yeah, no. It's actually a funny story. I mean, in hindsight, it's hilarious. I mean, when it was happening, I was.
That's like sitcom territory. That's Arrested Development territory.
Like Kramer.
Yeah, right.
Something Kramer would do. And lots of possession charges, trespassing. USC used to get me with trespassing charges whenever I would show up, wander onto campus when I was high. So a lot of felonies that eventually got expunged later on in my years. But yeah. So, I think altogether, I have 2 felony charges, but they didn't end up in convictions, and about 6 misdemeanors altogether. So yeah, quite a record that even people in Arizona still bring up today when I get pulled over every now and
then. Okay, sorry. There's one other point. So your relationship with your family had kind of deteriorated during this time. Is that right? So because you said you were living on the street.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't want to ask too much about your family, but what about living on the street? Like what was that? What was that like?
That was different. I mean, I don't think if anybody knows out there, but when you're homeless, you get smelly really, really fast when you're not living in the comforts of your home or a daily shower, and you start to realize why there's a certain smell in downtown LA, the homeless smell, and I recognize it still to this day when I smell it around. But it's like you mentioned. I mean, at this point, my relationships with my family had deteriorated to a point where nobody wanted anything to do with me. Nobody wanted to talk to me. No one wanted to give me any resources of any kind. Nobody wanted. I mean, my family just turned their back on me, and they rightfully did, because I was manipulative, and I would just use their love for me as a weapon against them to basically, carve out my addiction even farther. And, so after a while I was homeless in LA. I was living on living off of Broadway and 8th. I would sleep under an overhang. Usually that was the place I would sleep. The shops would close up about 7, and I get my cardboard box and sleep there. And I would beg for change and do really masterful criminal acts like like steal the tip jar at Starbucks. That was like my gig, like that I would do, like to make extra money here and there. And I remember one time I went and I took the Starbucks chip jar and it was tied by a rope to like the actual counter. So I ran off with it, and then the rope, it snapped and tight, and then like the change just flew everywhere, and I just ran. It was like a cartoon scene. But this is what I would. This is the kind of life that I lived, and
I think the parking in the sheriff's parking lot takes the cake, but that's a close second.
yeah, it is. But after, I mean, I was living. I mean, being homeless. I mean, I really didn't understand how bad I had my physical health had gotten until I sobered up. When I realized how blistered my feet were and how sunburnt my skin was, from sleeping on the streets for so long. And I got used to that life really quickly, which was really scary because at that point, in my 20s, like thinking that this is what God has in store for me. This is the story of Brandon, homeless in downtown LA, talking about how, I really have a lot of potential and I'm actually really smart while I'm sitting there smoking crack with
Yeah.
lungs.
And the first time the reason that I asked you to go on this kind of 15 minutes to fill in the hole here is because I learned this story from you for the first time when we were on a trip from San Diego to MRS in Phoenix, and I had not known any of this. I had known precisely zero, and I think the crux of the story is what happened in the courtroom, and your mom in the courtroom. So I wanted to make sure that all of the emotional weight is behind this moment before you describe what happened there.
Yeah, no problem. And for those who are listening too, this is a very appended form because I don't know if you remember, but we were driving for 5 hours.
Yes.
We were talking for literally 5 hours. It took 5 hours to me to describe to you probably about like not even half of what the whole story is, because I've given you more bits and pieces as our friendship has grown over the years. But yeah, I think so what you're talking about is the moment I went back into that courtroom thinking that Judge Tynan was going to send me to prison for 5 years, and I wanted to go to prison. And Tynan was sick that day. He still remembers actually that day that he was sick because I bring it up a lot. And there's another judge, Judge Dorothy Reyes, and my mom was like, she was relieved that I was turning myself in and I was going to go to prison. That finally someone was going to have me locked up, like for a good amount of time, so I could sober up. And Judge Reyes, she saw my file and she was like, well, Mr. Marin, I'm going to give you one more chance. I think if you go to this new rehab or this other rehab called Warm Springs, I think this would do a lot of good for you. So I'll give you a choice. You want to go to prison, or do you want to go try it one more time and go to rehab? And I was sitting there with the handcuffs on, and I turned around. My mom was like sitting there. She's like miming to me, go to prison, go to prison. And I turned around, and I was like, I want to go to rehab. I want to try this one more time. And then my mom was like, like he's going to, because she heard this story 1,000 times. And I went in and something, and they locked me up and I went to that rehab. And that's where things really changed for me. That day was March 9th of 2007. I remember that because that was the last time I got high or drank. The next day, March 10th, 2007, would be my sobriety date, and I've been sober ever since.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And from that point, I found Alcoholics Anonymous at that rehab. I put every effort into that program that I put into my PhD, my job, every peer-reviewed publication, like that same fervor and drive that I put into those things, I put into Alcoholics Anonymous. I tried to be an academic and just apply all that those gifts that I had to AA so that I could learn this thing, because I really needed something to work. And it did. It really did. I mean, people can scoff at like 12-step programs, but for me, it's the only thing that's worked. And I mean, today, it's been a long time. It's been 13 years, but I mean, like you mentioned, I mean, I met you like 5 years later, when I was, after I got sober. I mean, I eventually expunged my record. I did everything the court told me to do. And then they released me from probation. I went to USC and I'm like, can I come back to school? And they gave me a long list of things I needed to do before coming back. And I did every single one of them, checked them off. Something that was like unfathomable, like to me, like when I was younger, like when I was an addict, I could not do one thing you asked me to. But this long 20-line list of things that USC gave me to do, which was like community service, volunteer at a program for 12 months, take 5 classes at a community college to prove that you still can go to school. I did every single one of those things line by line, and then I turned it into the Office of Judicial Affairs, and they're like, okay, we'll enroll you again.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Professor Theodore Sotzis at USC, he's a reactor engineering professor. He remembers when I was high in those classes. And, he remembers like my addiction and what it did to me. And he was there to welcome me back. And he was like, I remember him telling me this, it's like, to overcome what you need to overcome is going to take nothing but fortitude on your part. And to get where you want to go is going to take 10 times more effort than somebody who has, not done any of the things you've done, because of the wreckage you caused. And I was like, I understand that, and I'm willing to do that. So, yeah, I mean, you've seen my transcripts when I applied from USC to UCSD. There's like a striation.
So, yeah, and yeah, I do want to talk about that in a second. But going back to rehab for just a second, how many people were in your cohort?
Oh, yeah, at Warm Springs, which is no longer open. It's a county rehab. When I went in, I mean, this will kind of give you an idea of the disease of addiction and exactly how pervasive it is and how deadly it is. There was 200 people in my rehab. And over the 4 months that I spent there, I got to know every single one of those people very well because that you have nothing else to do. And just like jail, I mean, like you say you're going to keep in contact. We're going to go to meetings together. We're going to, like, when we get out, we're going to do this. We're going to surf, Out of those 200 people, 2 years ago, there was only 2 people that were sober from all of that, me and my friend Shane. Now, to this day, I am the only one that I know of that stayed sober since that time, which like literally freaks me out. Like even just saying that right now, because I mean, my son's in the other room, my 16-month-old son, my wife, I mean, I'm in this house that I actually own. Like, and if you were to tell me that if I had a fishbowl of 200 marbles and, there's one black marble in it, and then I would, like, if you were to tell me that, like, you would bet your life on picking that black marble out of that fishbowl, that I would say, like, you don't have a chance in hell. Like, I'm not going to take that.
And you did bet your life on picking that black marble out of the fishbowl.
Yeah, I did. Like, I really did. And it freaks me out because it's like, I don't know why, like, well, I do know why, but it's just, it really makes you appreciate that there is something greater than just what you physically see. I mean, AA really brought out a spiritual side for me, and I feel like, what I call God, the universal consciousness or whatever, fate, whatever you want to call it. Like, I believe that there is a plan for me, and because there is a plan for me, which I feel is helping people. I need to help people, either learn, whether it's like through my scientific part of my life or whether it is recovery, like getting sober. Whatever it is, I need to help people, and that is what, why that black marble was picked out of this fishbowl, because this black marble has, a purpose. And it has a great purpose, and, it's that's the only reason, that's the only way I can rationalize why I'm still sober today, because that there is like a purpose for me to help other people, and that God has a plan for me.
And this drive not only allowed you to complete your degree at USC, but also to want to apply to a PhD program. And how did that work out?
Yeah, I mean, when I was reading that Star Trek technical manual, I always wanted. I read, a lot of the citations in there are from PhDs. PhDs actually, physicists actually made that thing. And I remember thinking, like, I want to get a PhD one day. Like, I want to go all the way with my education. And I remember when I was homeless, I was like, well, so much for that, and thinking about how I had just beat up my life so much that there was no way I was going to get that back. And I remember when I got sober, this was my bar. My bar was like, I'm just going to get a job at Big Lots, and I'll just stay there for the rest of my life. Because that, just having a small job and just being sober was so much better than the life I lived. This whole dreams that I had when I was a kid, I knew that I had probably washed all that away, and there was no way I could get any of that back. So I was cool with like the fact that, yeah, maybe I'll just get this mundane existence and I'll be happy with that, because anything is better than me than the hell of addiction. And like you mentioned, I mean, this program and sobriety and this, like, I've gotten so much more from that. Like, I actually, when I finished my degree at USC, which I thought I wouldn't be able to do, Andrea Armani, who she said you should apply to grad school. And I remember telling Noah, my undergrad advisor, I worked in his lab, like, my GPA isn't that good, and he's like, well, let's just try it, like, Brandon, let's just see what happens, and if you can't get in anywhere, we'll figure it out then. And
yeah, what a great attitude.
Yeah, and other professors, they were a little bit harsher. They were like, you're wasting your money on this, and I didn't ask them for, I'm sure, actually, I think who those professors are, but I basically just went on the side of positivity. I was like, I know definitely if I don't try, it won't happen. Mm-hmm. And I tried. I got into UCSD, and Andrea Tao took me into her lab, and and there was she worked with me on that. Actually, she said, your background is patchy, like with your undergrad record. Like,
sometimes you need a champion.
Yeah, and she was like, can you tell me a little bit about that? And I told you in a couple of paragraphs what I just spilled, verbal diarrhea during this podcast. Mm-hmm. But and she was like, that's really, really commendable. Like, you know what? Like, I look forward to seeing you here and working with you. And yeah, I mean, she worked with me to get into this program. And I remember she asked me for, she told me, she was like, I hope you can, I hope that you make it worth it, basically. Like, she said, I hope that you show everybody that taking a chance on you was not was worth it. You know what I mean? Like, because we're going to reject some students that have great backgrounds because for you, because you told us your story. And I mean, I chat with Andrea still to this day, and I haven't asked her about that, but I feel like I delivered on that, because, I finished the program. I tried to volunteer. I tried to be the best graduate student I could.
Yeah. I remember so this went down with Professor Andrea Tao a few months actually before I arrived, because we actually started at UCSD at the same time, and you were in my class. And you sat in the front row, and I remember the first time we had really a personal interaction was when, about 2 weeks into the quarter, the basement flooded, and you had come up and alerted me as the only, I don't know, the faculty member with his door open on a Saturday morning, and you told me that don't worry, the appropriate authorities have been alerted, and the fire department was on its way. And and building and grounds came, and I think my I think the I don't know, maybe the median person might have walked by and said, "Oh, it's flooded. Let's get the hell out of here." But I think I'm like, "Oh, who is this guy? This guy is pretty cool."
I remember, I actually, that was one thing I always tried to do. I would never try to present a problem to my, and I still do that to this day, present a problem to my superiors without having at least two actions already being done to solve that problem and a plan. Like, because it's like, hey, what good am I if I'm just like that bird that just dies in the cave when gas like hits it, you know? Like, but yeah, I remember that day.
So a couple of years in, you transferred into my group, and then you had a super productive couple of years. Got a couple of great papers, including what I considered to be one of my lab's top two scientific discoveries, and that is the orthogonal detection of beating cardiomyocytes using a piezoplasmonic mechanism. And I just can't believe that experiment worked, but the data are just deadly, and clearly it did work because there was no other mechanism to account for it. And a couple of rounds of reviewers that couldn't quite see the light, but nanoscale eventually came through for us. But anyway, I always hold up that paper as like the that and the biodegradable semiconducting polymer. But anyway,
Like we still own that word too. If you Google piezoplasmonic,
that's all you. And then I get half of the emails in my spam folder, or maybe 10%. That's no joke, are addressed to Brandon C. Marin for some sort of plasmonic cell something or other. And sometimes even like American Society of Pediatrics is inviting you to a conference and sending it to me. But anyway, I digress. So we are we're coming up on an hour now. I just want to give you the opportunity uh, to riff on a few subjects in brief. Tell me about you. You were quite active with diversity organizations when you were at UCSD, and what does diversity mean to you? And how do you think we can do a better job in STEM education and promoting it?
well, I mean, this is a good time to talk about this in general because of everything that's happening with racism in our country. I mean, systemic racism has, and I lead with systemic racism because this is the reason why we even pay attention to diversity, why we pay attention to minority groups, and why we pay attention to, affirmative action and things like this. Um, it's such a pervasive problem in this country that and has been here for like centuries and centuries. I think, to me, none of us directly own this problem. It's something inherited from our fathers and grandfathers and so forth. But we definitely do own the task to fix it and to rectify it. Because the system, and I can attest to it just being on the other side of the judicial system in the United States, the system is heavily weighted against minorities, like in this country. And what's interesting is even over the last like few months, just being quarantined and learning more about my own my own conceptions of like racism, that a lot of this is subliminal. Like it causes us to make actions that are like sometimes you don't even like consciously make, just because of like your personal experiences. So for me, like diversity,
And I mean diversity, inclusion, anti-racism. I don't want to, I don't mean to umbrella these terms, but just for the sake of brevity, we kind of have to.
yeah, no problem. Yeah. I mean, for me, diversity is something like, because that I wanted to tie that back into to to the diversity part. I think it's something that really needs to be encouraged and ingrained into our culture, just both academic and just as a whole. I mean, I love hearing stories about people that grew up literally like in poverty in other countries and completely turn it around with this. This country this is a great country. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it's a beautiful country, and it's definitely, the resources here and the potential here is limitless, you know, and this is a great area to thrive. So to hear people that like have gone through things with their backgrounds, like coming from other countries, or they're part of a minority population, like hearing those stories and watching them thrive, like like currently, like in academia, and even at where I work today, is something that really, really gets. I love it. I mean, because I'm one of those stories. I mean, it's. I mean, you know, my family, my grandparents were born in Mexico too. You know, like they're, and I'm part of a minority group, and I think for me, like, I think it's something that we don't pay attention enough to, and I try to do as much as I can personally to promote it and to help it thrive, just diversity and inclusion. And I mean, you were aware of some of that when I was at UCSD. I mean, it was involved in SHIP and
Society for Hispanic Professional Engineers.
Yeah, and I was the graduate ambassador for some time, and I loved my work with SHIP, and I mean, it's such an awesome organization. They have so much going on, and for me, like, I've always wanted to be a part of that and just encourage it, because my story is very much one of those, basically those boilerplate stories that comes out of a diversity pamphlet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it boilerplate. If you had to look at the minimum and the maximum, like living on the street, from the depths of living under this overpass in a cardboard box, to getting clean, which is probably the most difficult thing that you have done, to completing your BS, to completing your PhD, then doing amazingly well and being an inventor on a phone book of patents in your current position is really amazingly inspirational. It goes way beyond boilerplate.
Not to mention winning the highest award that my company has to offer recently. I can actually say that publicly.
Congratulations! What is the name of this? What is the name of the award?
It's the Intel Achievement Award.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's kind of like a career award at our company, and yeah.
And also the highest teaching award given to graduate students at UCSD too. So you are cleaning up. And what are your ultimate career goals now? Career as it intersects with helping others.
Right. I mean, for me, I think, I mean, my lifelong purpose is always, like, since 2007, has been to try to help as many people with the problems that I had as possible. And by that, I mean addiction and alcoholism. That has always been my purpose since then. But I think more directly, I really enjoy teaching, and I really enjoy passing on my knowledge to other people. I mean, that much is apparent in Alcoholics Anonymous, and even in academia and industry right now. Like, that's very apparent. And I feel like for me, my long-term goals are hopefully to get back into teaching and help people at the university level. I think the way I describe it is, you have a battery and you put it in a certain appliance and it'll give electricity, but there's certain types of batteries for certain types of appliances, right? And I feel like right now, like, there's an appliance that maybe I could, like, work better in, and I think that appliance, like, metaphorically, is teaching. The reason why I say that is because of the feedback that people have given me when they have worked with me with teaching. I mean, for me, what got me into teaching was that my teachers cared about me and they made me excited to learn. And I have heard from former students like, Brandon, I didn't get this until you explained this to me, and I'm really, really grateful. At this time, when you were my TA, I really didn't want to be doing chemical engineering. I didn't really want to finish my major, but it really helped me get back on track. You got me excited to learn about this again. And that for me was like, that's awesome. And if I can couple that, like how you mentioned before with diversity, like helping diversity like flourish, like with our academic system, that to me would be the perfect fit. I think right now I'm seeing a lot of that through on the industry level, because it doesn't have to just be academia. It could be industry too. And right now I'm loving my job at Intel. I love the people I work with, and I love the programs that I'm involved with. And I can do that same mission statement here as well. But I think long-term, something I'd really love to get back into is just like full-time teaching. And that's like, I feel like the puzzle piece fits the best, and I'm okay waiting until the perfect position pops up, because I think my life up until this point can attest that things happen for a reason. The places you get rejected from to go to school, the jobs you get declined for, and the people that you don't meet and do meet all happen for a reason. And for me, I just over what I've explained over the last hour, I know that this is part of a grander plan. So I'm sure the opportunity will present itself, and when it does, I just want to be able to be willing to seize it. So yeah.
Awesome. What a great attitude. Is there anything that you wish I had asked that I didn't? Any parting words for the audience?
I think, for anybody that out there that's clicked with this story, there's so much more to it than it can just be summed up in an hour. If anything kind of clicks, even with the addiction, and you have that problem out there today, or somebody with that, I just want to be able to say that there is a solution, because that was something that I, even at 22, 23 years old, when I finally got sober, I didn't know was out there, and I wish somebody would just have flat out told me that there's a way to, to clean up and get sober. So that's the one thing I would want to say. And that, and other than that, I'd like to thank you for asking me to speak and having this wonderful conversation. I actually always enjoy talking to you, so I'm glad we got to. There's something I can actually look back and look it over again when I want to reminisce.
Yeah, it was absolutely my pleasure to have this conversation, and I think it will mean a lot to a lot of people. So thank you for sharing your story and your inspiration. And with that, I've been speaking to Dr. Brandon Marin, and thank you for tuning in. Take care. Thanks for listening to Ideas in STEM Ed, a production of the Idea Engineering Student Center in the Jacobs School of Engineering at UC San Diego. This episode was edited and engineered by Sky Lee, with theme music written and performed by John Viviani. Title art was created by Caitlin Wong. Special thanks to Sarah Eckert for guest booking and marketing. The Idea Center works to promote community, success, and inclusion at all levels. To reach us for guest suggestions and other feedback, please send an email to ideadirector@eng.ucsd.edu. And to learn more about our programs, visit jacobschool.ucsd.edu/idea. As a final note, the views expressed by me or the guests do not necessarily reflect those of the Idea Center, the Jacobs School of Engineering, or UC San Diego. See you next time.